Hey everybody, my name is Spencer, and in this video sponsored by Garfield Games, I'm going to give you a preview of Circadians Chaos Order, designed by S.J. McDonald and Zach Smith. Chaos Order is an asymmetrical, tactical, practical, funtical game for 2 to 5 players. But before I get into it, I'd like to ask you to please subscribe to the Lighten Up initiative, especially if you like it when someone makes up words for the sake of a lame rhyme. In Chaos Order, that name is kind of funny actually. You have chaos, then order, chaos, order. I wonder if that was intentional. In Chaos Order, players will choose from 6 asymmetric factions to play as. Each one has their own means of winning the game, unique leaders, attribute cards, and other abilities. The factions are Circadians, Oxitaya, Larian, Scaro, Draic, and AI. These seemingly unpronounceable factions have been plunged into combat, fighting for control over giant, mysterious relics. They're doing this because, well, wouldn't you? Now, there's a mythos surrounding the game I won't get into. Check out the crowdfunding page to learn about it for yourself. The game takes place over a maximum number of 6 rounds. It's important to note that the end of the game will most likely vary from play to play. Here's why. First of all, each faction has their own unique way of earning fame points. Essentially, once a faction earns the required amount of points, they win. However, the game can also end when a faction controls a certain number of relics. There's a point at the end of each round where players will check and see who is controlling the relics on the board. Control, meaning a region that contains pieces from only one faction. If one faction controls all of the remaining relics on the board, they win the game. I say remaining because one relic is removed at the end of each round, making the task of controlling all remaining relics just a little bit more easy as each round passes. So if you like the idea of a variable endgame trigger, this game executes that concept very well. Now, each round of the game is made up of several phases that are conveniently displayed on the left side of the board. A round begins with the set prices phase. This is where you'll experience a sort of action selection that you probably haven't seen very often. What happens is, the first player will choose one of the 5 actions and place one of their pricing tokens beside it. Now, these tokens determine how much the action will cost for the other players. Most of these tokens require an energy cost to the supply and to the player who priced the action. Of course, the player who priced the action will get to do it for free. This beginning part of each round already offers some strategic decisions. The most obvious is, well, which action do you want to do most? But also, you can price out your opponents by making an action more expensive, but then you won't get energy paid to you. So, which pricing token should you use? Once everybody has a chance to price an action, the game continues into the action phase, where each action will be executed in the order shown on the left side of the board. Discover, build, harvest, recruit, and move. When it's time to perform an action, each player will decide if they want to pay the cost to do it or pass until the next action. Now, I'm not going to go through every action and tell you what they all do, but I do want to point out how you would execute an action on your turn. The following details are based on how far up each research track you've moved your cube. The higher up it is, the more powerful or efficient the action is when you perform it. The top part of a column is the main action. It must be performed first. Then in the middle of the column is an immediate effect. It may also contain a gem lock that blocks an action from being researched until a gem is paid. And finally, the bottom part of the column contains an auxiliary action. It's kind of like a bonus action, but can only be performed once per turn and only if a player is able to pay the energy or gem cost. Now, once all actions have been executed, it's now time for the combat phase. Here, factions will resolve all battles on the map where at least 2 factions have a presence in the same region. Players will use a combat wheel and possibly a tactics card to plan their attack. Then, when both parties are ready, wheels are revealed and the outcome is resolved. Now, this is pretty cool. These tactics cards will add values to strength, attack, and defense depending on how you set the wheel. There are also some abilities on the wheel that will happen if you choose that section, like this one that lets you roll a combat die in exchange for 1 gem. This can further increase a faction's strength or defense depending on the face rolled. Outcomes can result in losing fighters, a faction retreating, or resetting additional pieces. After combat comes income, where players will simultaneously earn income from various sources. And then the round ends with the final phase, check relics, which I mentioned earlier. And this is when you check to see if one faction controls all remaining relics on the map. If they do, they win. If there is no winner, the faction in the region with the current round's relic will get it, allowing them to cover up a bonus space on their faction board. Now let's talk about those faction boards. Each one is unique to its faction. They contain helpful information, symbols, and tracks. You'll use the recruitment track to spend recruitment points to recruit fighters when you do the recruit action. There are 3 types of buildings: foundries, outposts, and strongholds. When these are built, the space underneath reveals new abilities for the faction to take advantage of. The boards will also help you keep track of your income. Now I want to pause here and make an observation. I can't help but notice a few similarities between Chaos Order and the game's Scythe. You've got the combat wheel and the faction board with buildings on it that reveal abilities when they are built. I wouldn't be surprised if Scythe were an inspiration for this game. However, the execution in this game is different enough that will impact your strategy differently. It's not a carbon copy, but familiar, I guess I would say. That being said, if you like Scythe or games like it, maybe you'll enjoy Chaos Order. Also think about your enjoyment of other asymmetrical games. Do you enjoy Root or other games like it? You will probably have fun with the asymmetry in Chaos Order. They are different enough that you'll want to try every one in order to see how they play. However, I don't think the factions are as diverse as they are in Root, which makes it easier to teach the game and remember the rules. Speaking of rules, let's get into the game's difficulty. Now, on BoardGameGeek.com, Circadians Chaos Order displays a complexity rating of 4.25 out of 5. I don't know exactly how that number is arrived at, but don't let it scare you away from this game. Now, for example, Lisboa, a very intricate game with multiple moving parts that at times feels like you're playing several games at once, is listed as a 4.57. But Chaos Order isn't nearly as difficult as Lisboa. In fact, I'd probably rank it at about a 3.5 difficulty. The reason is that while there's asymmetry, different rules for each faction, and some very situational rules, I don't think it's too terribly difficult to play. You might be overwhelmed at first, but everything in the game just makes sense once you get going. There's a lot going on, sure, don't get me wrong, but learning the game went much smoother for me than I expected. The rulebook does an excellent job of teaching the game, and each faction has its own rules resource. Plus, with many helpful visual cues, like the organization of the round and actions over on the board, and the iconography on player boards, the amount of times you have to check the rulebook are minimized. The estimated playing time is 120 to 240 minutes, and I think that's pretty accurate. Of course, that all depends on if there are new players, the number of players, and how quickly a player can reach a goal. To give you an idea, the most recent game I played was a 3-player game. My friend won at the end of round 5, and it took us 2 hours to play. But the game doesn't feel long, especially since you have the opportunity to perform every action each round. There aren't really turns, so everyone can stay engaged for most of the time. Now, that's about as in-depth as I want to go. If you want more detailed rules explanations, you can watch a playthrough or read the rulebook. I believe many people will thoroughly enjoy Chaos Order. There's a huge audience for it. Even if you aren't a fan of space or aliens, the gameplay is so engaging that I think you can look past those items. You'll have fun with the game if you like asymmetry, area control, combat, and elements of resource management. But at the same time, if you don't enjoy those types of games, Chaos Order may not be for you. Now, because of the variable endgame conditions, the game can be extremely eventful. In my most recent play, one faction was 1 turn away from winning by reaching its fame track goal. Then I did something on the next round that made it possible for the other player to win by controlling the remaining relics before our friend could claim the victory. The state of the game completely changed when we weren't expecting it to. It was very exciting. Finally, I just want to bring up the fact that Circadians Chaos Order is coming from a publisher that has an excellent track record with the games they produce. From the Of the West Kingdom games, to Hadrian's Wall, to Raiders of Scythia, Garfield Games has made it clear that they are dedicated to high-quality products. Well, that's about it from me on Circadians Chaos Order. There's a link in this video's description that will lead you to the campaign page. Head there now to learn more about the game and see if it's a good fit for you. I want to thank you all so much for watching this video, and until next time, don't take the board game hobby too seriously, just lighten up.